Hello, my name is Nathan and I'm the Information Specialist for the Community Library Network. This video is going to cover some basic aspects of using Microsoft Excel. We are going to learn the difference between a workbook, worksheets, cells, rows, and columns. We're going to look at how to navigate across large amounts of data. We are going to use the formula builder to make a couple formulas, use Autofill and FlashFill, create a basic table, a data entry form, save a selection, make a pivot table, a pivot chart, and learn how to use a slicer. But don't worry, I'm going to timestamp each section in the description so that you can navigate to them quickly if you need to. First, let's talk about some very basics of Excel. The entire Excel file is called a workbook. Each workbook contains multiple worksheets. You can navigate across different worksheets by using their tabs across the bottom. Each worksheet has over 17 billion cells arranged across over 16,000 columns and 1 million rows. Columns are groups of cells that run up and down. This is column A. Rows are groups of cells that run horizontally. This is row 1. This is cell A1. Cell B1 is just to the right, cell A2 just underneath. If we go over here, we have column F, row 25, cell F25. You may find yourself trying to navigate across vast amounts of data. One of the easiest shortcuts you can use is to hold down the Control key and use the arrow keys to navigate to the end of the data set. If you hold down the Shift key in addition to the Control key, you can select large ranges of data. This workbook contains a couple of worksheets that I've pre-populated with some data. I'm going to use a list of guests that appeared on The Simpsons to illustrate a few techniques. Then I'm going to show you what larger data sets may look like in a business setting and take what we learned from our Simpsons guest list and show you some really useful tools that can help you assess data effectively. The first thing we are going to cover is Autofill and FlashFill. You can use Autofill to create repeating or consecutive numbers. All you have to do is take the first cell. In this case, we are going to do consecutive numbers. So I've put the number 1 in this field. You grab the little green box in the corner with your mouse, left click and drag it to the end and let go of your mouse button. As you can see here, it puts all ones in every cell, but we wanted consecutive numbers. If you click this little button that shows up at the bottom, you will see the option to fill series. By selecting that, the numbers will populate sequentially. That's how you do an autofill. FlashFill is a little different. FlashFill is when Excel recognizes patterns to save you time. If we look at Marsha Wallace, you can see that we want to break apart the first name and the last name. Doing something like this is helpful if you were going to pair this workbook with a form letter in Microsoft Word, for example. We don't want to have to go through this and write everyone's first name in a cell and then their last name in another cell. So we're going to use FlashFill. If I click on Marsha's name, grab that same little green square in the bottom corner and drag it down like we did with the numbers and let go of my mouse, you're going to see Marsha populates in all of the cells. But if you click this little box, it gives you the option to FlashFill. We can do the same exact thing with the last name so you can see it again. What Excel did is looked for where Wallace is in the other cells and noticed that it was just a part of that cell. Then it took that part, broke it off from the whole, and populated a new cell with that information. It did the same thing with Marsha. It recognized where in the previous cells that was and pulled that information out to populate the new cell. That's how you do a flash fill. The next thing we're going to look at is our formula builder. We are going to use it to populate some random numbers for our screen time field. The formula builder can be accessed through clicking the Insert function icon next to the preview area. Some common formulas include sum, count, average, median, and mode. The one we're going to use will generate a random number between two other numbers. It's called rand between. You can search for a formula by using the search bar at the top of the formula builder. If I type in RAND, it will bring up all the random formulas available. I'm selecting rand between. Once you select the function, go ahead and click Insert. For this particular function, I need to give it more information. It wants to know the lowest number I want to be generated and the highest number I want to be generated. Let's go between 1 and 7 minutes and click Done. There we go. It generated a random number for us. Now we can click and hold the little green box and drag it down to the end. Let it go and it will generate random numbers all the way down. If you notice, the 1 that used to be here for Marcia is now a 3. Anytime you do something to a cell that holds this formula, it will generate a new random number. But I'm going to show you how to get a set of permanent numbers in this field. All you have to do is select Copy. Then we're going to paste it back into these cells. You'll see that the numbers change again. But what we're going to do is select Paste Values right down here. There's our number 3 again. Now we can use this data like it was a standard number that we just keyed into the cell. This is something that can be used to break out a sample for a survey or a study. Say you only need 10% of a survey population to represent the whole. You can generate random numbers between 1 and 10 and just take those that fall in a certain number. Let's try a different formula. This time we're going to go to the cell directly under those numbers we generated. We're going to add them all together. So I'll select our Insert function icon up top again and select Sum and click Insert. You can see it selected our data range automatically. You can adjust the data range if needed, or you can manually select the area by clicking and dragging. If you look at the formula builder as I drag the box down, you can see the range inside it changing. Once you have the range selected, click Done, and it will add all the numbers in the range together. Now we're going to count the number of cells with something in them. This is useful when you have large sets of data and need to know how many fields are filled. If we did just count, it will only count numbers that are in the field. If we select Count A, we can count any cells that have anything in them. When in doubt, the formula builder will tell you what each formula does. When you decide what function to use, click Insert. Then you will need to select your range again. For this, I'm going to go to the top cell I want to include and then hold Control and Shift and my down arrow, and it will select all the way down to the bottom of my data set. If you have cells that are empty, doing this will stop the selection at the gap. But if you do it again, it will keep selecting more data until you get to the bottom. You can see in the Value 1 box that the range goes all the way down to D63. When you have your range selected, click Done, and it will tell you how many cells have something in them. In this instance, it's 62. Remember, our top line was a header line, so we didn't select that, and we went all the way down to D63. So 62 cells being filled makes sense. The next thing we're going to do is change our sum of the numbers to an average. Maybe you don't need to know the total amount of something, but knowing the average is more helpful. You could just come to the preview bar and change SUM to AVR, and that will change it. But until you know all of those codes, we're going to use the formula builder. So we'll just delete that. We'll start out in the cell that we want that average to show up in. Then we're going to select the average from our formula builder and click Insert function. It automatically selects the range again, and we know row 2 through row 63 is what we want. So I'm going to click Done. There we have it. The average is 3.9 and change. Maybe we don't need to see all those places after the decimal point. Well, if we go right up here to this little decimal point icon, we can click it a few times and reduce the number of decimal places that show after the decimal point. As you can see, it will round to the nearest number as you do it. The button next to this icon will increase the number of decimal places. Now I'm going to show you how to convert this collection of data over to a basic table. Tables are good to work with because they will automatically expand as you enter more data, and they can be easier to read and have sort functions. I'm going to start out by removing the two formulas we have hanging out here at the bottom. Then I'm going to start in the lower right-hand corner of our data set, hold down the Shift and Control keys, and hit the up arrow, then the left arrow. This is going to select all the data we have entered. Then I'm going to go up here to Insert and select Table. It's going to pop up with a box that shows what I have selected. Excel is also recognizing that I have some headers in place. But if it doesn't recognize that for you, you can just check the little box here and it will. When that is done, click OK. You can see it changes this to a table. You can change the look right up here. The other cool thing is you can sort these columns with a drop-down box. Let's sort this one by descending order. You can see that it puts that column in order from largest to smallest and has moved all of the other fields in the table to match. Al is still number 62. You can do the same thing alphabetically. I'll sort this column from Z to A. You can just as easily sort from A to Z just by clicking the drop-down header and selecting Ascending. We could also sort the screen time in the same way. Let's sort it from most screen time to least. There you go. Now we're going to look at how to make a data entry form for the table we just made. This feature is only available on versions of Excel that operate on Windows, so if you're a Mac user, you won't be able to use this feature. This feature can be really helpful and save a lot of time if you are hand keying data into your spreadsheet. I'm going to show you how to add the option to create a form for a table, just in case it doesn't show available to you, and then I'll show you what you can do with the form and what it looks like. To get the form option, you may have to go up here to this little drop-down box. This will open up a window to customize your quick access toolbar. If you go down here and select More Commands, it is going to open up your ability to add and change what shows in your quick access toolbar. To find the form option, choose All Commands and then page down to Form. They're in alphabetical order, so that should make it a little easier. Once you highlight Form by clicking on it, click Add. This adds it to your quick access toolbar. It shows right up here. All you have to do is select any cell inside the table and click the Form button you just added. This is going to open up a form so you can use it for data entry. When it first opens, you'll see it shows items currently in the table. But if you click the New field, it allows you to enter information by simply tabbing between fields and hitting Enter when you are done. This can be very advantageous if you're entering a lot of information that has to be entered manually. Now we're going to shift gears a little bit and look at how you might deal with larger amounts of data. I'm going to switch worksheets within the workbook by selecting the Library Stats tab down here at the bottom. If you want to add an additional blank sheet, you can click the plus sign right next to that. But for this, I'm going to go into the Library Stats. As you can see, this is a larger amount of data. We have 68 rows and 40 columns. But these techniques work on data sets that are much larger than that as well. I'm going to select the full data set by holding down Shift and Control, hitting the down arrow and then the right arrow. Now I'm going to save that selection by going right up here where it says A1, clicking on it, and typing in a name. For this, I'll just use stats. Now, anytime I need to quickly reference this section, I can just select stats and it will be there. Now I'm going to show you how to make a pivot table. Pivot tables are a great way to organize and work with large amounts of data without the chance of changing your data set. If you are working directly with your data set, you could accidentally change values within a particular cell and not realize you did it. There's also a lot of functionality that pivot tables can create, so let's look at how to create a pivot table. Since we have our stat selection active, I'm going to go right up here under the Insert tab and click Pivot Table. You can see in the Table/Range section, it tells us what we have selected. But if you didn't have anything selected, you could also type in Stats, and it would recognize your saved selection. I also have the new Worksheet toggle turned on, so it will open up in a fresh worksheet with just the pivot table. Now I'm going to select OK. This is the screen that opens up. There's a little weird box on the left. It shows we opened up a new pivot table. And then there's a bunch of new selection options on the right. We're going to start out with the items on the right. Let's start with a few selections to start with. Let's go with calendar year and month. Now, you see how it put calendar year here in the value section? That's not what we need. We want to view whatever we're going to view by months within a calendar year. So we're going to click and drag calendar year from values to be above month in the rows section. Now you can see we have months under the year heading and can collapse and expand these to make the data easier to work with. But now we have to add the data we want to work with into the pivot table. I think we'll make this one, let's see, how about district total circulation, all categories? That's a good one. You can see when I click that, it's going to populate each month's data, and it will also add up for the year. I can collapse the fields to make the data easier to work with, and it doesn't disappear. It just gets hidden, and I can bring it back when I need it later. If these things over here are in the way, you can just close them. Now we're going to add a pivot chart that interacts with our pivot table. The advantage to a pivot chart compared to a regular chart is that when we change the way data is represented in the pivot table, it will also update our chart. To add a pivot chart, simply go right up here to the pivot chart icon and click on it. A pivot chart will appear for you. I'm just going to take a second and make this a little bigger, make it easier to see. There you go. Now you see how the 2017, 18, and 19 are all collapsed together? That's because they're collapsed on our pivot table. If we want them to show the individual months, we can expand those years in our pivot table, and the chart will update too. As you do that, you can see the y-axis of the chart adjusting to fit the new data ranges, and the x-axis shifts to represent the months that were just expanded. You can also hover over a bar on the graph, and it will show you the details of that particular month. Now I'm going to show you how to insert a slicer. Slicers can be used to easily limit the data that you are using. You can use them with just pivot tables, but when you use them on a pivot table that's paired with a pivot chart, you can make your charts very interactive. To add a slicer, make sure you have a cell in the pivot table selected, then select the Pivot Table Analyze tab and come right down here to Insert Slicer. It's going to give you options of what can be sliced. You can only slice things that are actually in your pivot table. So for this, I'm going to select month and calendar year. It doesn't matter which order you select these in. Then I'm going to hit OK. This adds these two boxes. I'm going to go ahead and move one here and the other one here, and maybe shift our graph over a little bit. All right, let's look at how these work. Say I just want to see what goes on in January. I can just click January and it'll show me all of the Januaries that are in my data set. This is really helpful if I'm looking at comp data for year-over-year periods. If I wanted to see multiple months, I can hold the Control button and select more than one month. Let's go ahead and clear the slicer by hitting the button with this little red X. Then I'll select April and May. Now it just shows me April and May. Let's clear that and try something different. Maybe we want to see what was going on in 2019. We can just select that here, and voila, our table changes, and so does our chart. You can do that with any year. We can also do things like change the title of the chart. There we go. Maybe we want a different type of chart. If you right-click on the chart, you can choose the option of Change Chart Type and pick something different, like a line graph. You can also do things like select these points and add data labels. Then you can move them around to where you want them, like this and this. There we are. I hope this little tutorial has helped you learn a little more about how to use Excel more effectively. There's a lot more to learn, including how to integrate other Microsoft Office products like Word with Excel. I encourage you to come and see one of our librarians and find out what resources we have that you can use to learn more. I'm also going to put some links to some web resources in the description below. Thank you, and we'll see you in a library soon.